Welcome! In this series of videos, we will look at software add-ons for both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at how you can authenticate users accessing your CGI application on the Abyss web server. At the end of the last video in this series, we had successfully created a web CGI application to return a web page to our browser. If you are going to be developing websites for an intranet, you may find it advantageous or even essential that you know who is accessing the website and from where. For user authentication, there are a number of methods by which you can achieve this. If you are working in a large organisation, you may already have the infrastructure set up to support this. Such authentication methods like SAML or OAuth can be complex and initially difficult to understand. The approach we're going to take today will work for personal web servers or local intranets that are not internet facing, and is much easier to understand. We're going to create a portal application in PowerBasic that will determine the user using the application, the computer they are logged into, and the domain they are using. This portal application will be put on a shared network folder to which the user has only read access. And that application will then call the website CGI application on the browser. So now we will create our web portal application. I've set this application up so that it can be compiled with either the console compiler or the Windows compiler. This is achieved by using this if-def command. This determines if we're compiling in the console compiler, and if so, it turns the console off, so the user will not see a console window when the application runs. We're also going to declare two include files in this application, one for the Windows 32 API and one for a graphics library we prepared for a previous video. So when this portal application runs, we want to determine the three key pieces of information: the username the user is signed on to the computer with, the name of the computer, and the domain, if any, the computer is actually attached to. Once we have determined that information, we can display a very short duration splash screen to the user while we connect to the website. So we're going to set up some local variables to allow us to track all of this. And we will first populate the name of the user, the computer, and the domain name. We can determine these quite easily using the built-in environ command in PowerBasic. Next, we will store the path to our website in a variable, website path. This, as before, is to the Odroid 7 computer, CGI bin, and the application which we prepared in the last video, cc-cgi-demo.exe. And we're going to set the text in the title bar of our splash screen to say web portal for the user in the domain on the computer name. We can then take these three key pieces of information and we can add them together to give us a parameter string. This is the information we want our CGI application to pick up and handle. I could have these as three separate parameters, but I'm just adding them all together with a pipe command between each parameter. So we have a single parameter to pass to the website. So we're adding on to the end of our website path a question mark to indicate that there are parameters following, followed by the variable we're storing our parameters in. Next, we want to display the graphics window to say to our users that we're actually progressing the connection to the website. So we're going to do that by calling a function within our graphics library, Open Graphics Progress. We're setting the body text in the center of that window to say loading. We're setting the coordinates we want the window appearing at to be 100 by 100. And we're passing all these parameters to the function. The hwin variable is 0, which indicates that it's the desktop as the parent. Now, to give the user a few seconds to actually see the graphics window on the screen, we're going to update the progress bar on that window. So we're setting the progress bar initially to 30%, sleeping for 1 second, 1000 milliseconds, then updating it to 80% and sleeping for a further second. This gives the user 2 seconds to see the splash screen. Now we want to launch the web page itself. Again, we can do this quite easily by populating an ASCII-Z variable called ztext, and it is being made equal to the website path. And we're calling a Windows API call called shell execute. This will open up our default browser for websites. And once that is executed, we can close down our progress window. So that should be everything needed within our web portal. So let's just compile that, and we're going to copy that to a shared folder on our Odroid 7 computer, the one that's running the website. So there is our web portal exe. We'll just drag that over and drop it onto Odroid 7 in a shared folder called Portals. Now I'm connected to another computer, Odroid number 6. We're going to use this computer to actually simulate a user logging on to our website using our web portal application. So there is our application. If we just double click on it, the user briefly gets the splash screen up, and then it launches our web page. As you will see from the URL at the top of the screen, it's passing our 3 parameters after the question mark. The username, in this case first user, the computer name, Odroid 6, and the domain, which in this case is also Odroid 6, as this computer is actually running on a local account and is not signed into a domain. So now that we're passing that data to the website's CGI application, how can we pick it up from within that application itself? Let's go back to our CGI app and have a look. Here we are now back inside our CGI demo application. This at the moment is displaying back to the browser a very simple web page. In order to pick up the parameters that have been passed to it, this CGI application is going to have to be amended slightly. The first thing we need to do is to read in what's come in on the command line from standard input. We can do that using a function in our PBCGI library called readCGI. This will pull all the information in and deposit it into the input variable. Having deposited the information in that variable, we now have to look to see how many parameters we have received. In this case, we're only passing a single parameter, but in other cases, you may want to pass multiple parameters. We can do this by using another function in our library, parseParams. This will return the number of parameters, which we're putting into our pcount variable. It will also populate an array. If the number of parameters being passed to the CGI application is 0, then we have not received any parameters at all, and we will interpret this as a failure to authenticate. So the return to the browser can be a message to say that it is a failure to authenticate, and we would not allow the user to go any further. If the value is greater than 0, then we know we should only be receiving for this particular application 1 parameter. So we're going to make use of yet another function in our CGI library called decodeCGI. It takes a single parameter, which is the element in the array that you wish to read. If you are reading multiple parameters, you may want to do this in a for next loop. But as we know there is only going to be a single parameter, we can pick it up just by defining element number 1. So our variable first parameter would contain the parameter details. We can then parse out the 3 key pieces of information from that single variable: the user, the computer, and the domain. Now that we have that information, we can display that back to the user on our web page. This is easily done by embedding these variables in the HTML. First with the user, computer, and then domain. So if we try compiling our application now, it will compile quite cleanly. So we will now copy CGI demo exe over to the web server, overwriting the existing file. Now that that's been completed, we can now go back onto Odroid number 6 and attempt the query again. So if we go back to the web portal application and double click on it again, and it launches the splash screen and then straight into the website. And as we can now see, our CGI application has picked up the 3 parameters: the user, computer, and domain, all of which it's displaying on the screen. So in summary, what we have done today is we have created a portal application whose job it is to determine the user, the computer, and the domain they are signed onto. It will then connect to the website and pass these parameters to the CGI application. The CGI application has now been amended to pick up parameters. And once those parameters are in your CGI application, you can then do whatever you need with them. If you wish to limit access to the site based on the user, the computer or the domain, you now have full control. User access permissions could be controlled from within the application, within an external configuration file, or from a SQL database. All securely controlled by Odroid number 7, the web server. There are of course more things to do. We're passing information to the web server unencrypted. The web server itself is HTTP and not HTTPS, also not secured. We can of course address both of these, but we'll leave that for the next video. That's it for today. Thank you for watching.